the water's moving fast. It's conveyance. It's just making room for the water to move downstream. You know, and part of the benefits of the floodplain enhancement, if you think of it in cross-section, there's a lot more room you've created by enhancing the floodplain. If you're taking out 3 to 4 feet of gravel from the bottom, it seems like a lot during low flows. During an enormous flood, that volume isn't very much in the larger scheme of things. I think is a good way to think about it. And that's the beauty of the hydraulic modeling is you can tinker with these things. You can take the bar out, you can put it back in, you can pull a bridge out, and kind of get a sense of what works and what doesn't.
What's the overall time frame for all of this proposed work? Is there any?
Well, I mean, these are all recommendations. You know, our report ends with the recommendations. It's really up to the Safari and the town board and the community to decide which ones may be feasible. It's up to funders to decide which ones might be fundable. And really, it's a question for the community now.
Yeah, again, Alfred, I think what's going to happen, we're going to have time. So again, the town board members, each one of you received a draft copy of this report tonight. So just read through, look through things. If you have comments, when do you want comments by, Mark? Maybe mid next month?
Yeah, I was going to say in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That'd be great, yeah.
So again, we're looking to probably wrap this up by March. Once this is accepted by the town board, then we can look for funding sources, which again, we'll probably bring up at the Safari meeting and look at what's viable projects, what may be feasible, what kind of funding opportunities are out there, and then make recommendations probably from the Safari group to the town board and see where we go from there. But of course, we're going to have community input too. Again, I noticed Mr. Jameson is sitting here, and I know he's got one of those properties that had the little red dot on it. That's one of the properties I spoke to you about that I think there's something where, you know, an elevation and maybe moving it off, you know, moving it back on the lot a little bit would still retain that parcel, retain that tax base, and still work within the floodplain enhancement for that parcel. Of course, he's having battles with New York Rising because of the maps and where they are in adoption level, and that's all quite.
I wanted to ask about that. It's slightly off topic, but do you know what the disposition is of the new FEMA flood maps?
The DEC is in control of that right now. The DEC is drafting new model flood ordinances that are to be adopted along with your flood map. One of the things is they want to see a repetition of the state requirement where you go 2 foot above base flood elevation, which isn't necessarily duplicated in everybody's local law. There were some other holdups again. Irene was a holdup for quite some time. They had to redo a lot of the surveys after Irene and look at flood elevations. They had it out for amendments. As Mark pointed out on the Phoenicia map, you saw one section of Phoenicia was still pretty much covered. We were able to argue about reducing that or getting that out of there because there was an anomaly that showed up on the map because of the way that FEMA does their mapping versus the way that Milone and MacBroome can do the map with the 2D digital. FEMA doesn't use that or isn't allowed to use that as a viable product to show flood elevations. Anyway, we were able to get them to amend the map to reduce, pull out about 22 or 26 properties from the floodplain. So like the funeral home, that section were all reduced and pulled out of the floodplain now. They're not going to be required to have flood insurance if they go to a mortgage. But it's really, we've been hearing for year after year, it's going to be in the spring, it's going to be in the spring. Last we heard from Phil Escalay with the DEP when he talked to Bill Neckerman at DEC was that it's probably going to occur more towards the summer. Again, it's up to, once they say you can go ahead and adopt them, you can go ahead and start your process. We'll have like a 90-day window to go into adoption. And ultimately we have to adopt in order to allow people to continue to have flood insurance in the town. We do know one local municipality that balked at adopting their flood ordinance and their flood maps, and people started receiving letters that their flood insurance was canceled right there on the spot on that 90th day. And finally they had to call an emergency meeting of the town, get together with the attorney and approve the legislation to get the
So
flood
you're
insurance
saying
rates.
by this summer, the 90-day period may start?
I'm hoping
And then at the end of that, if the town adopts it, that's,
that then will be in the new maps and we get out of this quandary. I know you've had it and Harry's had it. I've had several other people. It's a quandary of what FEMA, New York Rising is saying you have to use the adopt map because that is the regulatory product. That is the law. The law is the law and you're not looking any other way. We go to conferences and the guy from the state, who's been doing this his whole life, he's actually, wasn't he president of the National Flood Certification, whatever? Yeah, he's saying when you're doing elevations, do it to the proposed map because it's better data. You know, the data they have to create those maps was basically, you know, two guys with a stick. This, they had LiDAR, they have it cross-checked, they've got models to back. I mean, there's so much information in layers on the new maps with the new product that it's hard to argue that it's best available data. And that's all we're ever told to use, is use the best available data. Well, I've got a proposed map, that's better than the old map, and actually reduces the elevations in Phoenicia quite an extent. I think yours was almost like 7 foot difference
I think it's 4 or 5.
or something, but
But that's significant.
it's significant, yeah.
So, but we still can't use
We
those.
still can't use it till it's adopted, and we have to be told when to adopt it. And we're waiting. There's a lot of people in town waiting because it's going to affect them, you know, both bad and good, where there's people getting removed from the floodplain and there's other people that are going to be added now. Again, many of the hollows, the Stony Clove, McKinley Hollow, Peck Hollow, all these little tributaries were never actually mapped. They were what's called an A zone or an approximate zone. So you had to use some just minor calculation and figure out what your elevation had to be. Now it's going to be based on that base flood elevation as mapped all the way up through the valley. So it's going to affect quite a few people when they go to sell their home. And we are getting calls about it all the time now. So.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Are you saying that after Irene, FEMA came in and changed the mapping? Because my flood
No.
insurance went from 300 to 3,000.
No, that's two different things.
Yeah, that's not a result of the mapping having been changed, it's just because they're attempting to bring the FEMA flood insurance program to actuarial rates, so everyone's flood insurance is going up and up.
It was
And
all being subsidized before.
yeah, and
It was being subsidized before.
and it relates
You
to
weren't
the,
paying the true amount that was really what you should have been paying. for
and it
everybody.
relates to the disasters we've had elsewhere, you know, Sandy and Irene and
The process of
Katrina.
the process of the maps being updated started before Irene.
Yeah,
And when Irene happened, they actually went out and did new surveys to just verify their data and what happened in that flood. So it actually kind of helped us a little bit.
Yeah, and the rates are going to continue to go up. I know, what this year, if you're a new homeowner, or it was something with if you're a new homeowner, and there was one other clause in there. It's going to go up like 25%
But commercial,
next year.
commercial's
Or,
24%.
yeah, commercial or second home.
Or severe repetitive loss,
Be repetitive.
second homes, and yeah, if you have a new policy, if your policy lapses, you'll go.
Everybody else, what they're doing is it's supposed to be a range between, I believe, 5 and 15% annually over the next 10 years. It will increase. Again, what they're doing is they're trying to get to actuarial rates. So instead of having the subsidy from the feds, so everybody's buying insurance. And of course, if you live outside the floodplain, they still offer a preferred rate policy, which is anywhere from like $275 to $450 a year. But if you're next to the floodplain, it's advisable you probably get that, because water does some weird stuff, and you just want to have that. It's a nice little peace of mind for a couple bucks.
If you have a federally insured mortgage, you have to have flood insurance.
And I had flood insurance, and I had flood in my lower floor, and I got nothing, so why pay $3,000?
right, yeah.
Well, you will be in a new map. You're not in it. Yeah. No, but again, they're showing it. So, yeah, that brings an interesting note too. We were talking about the 100-year. Again, know that the FEMA insurance rate is based on the 100 years. So even though we saw reductions in 10 and all that, the regulatory product is the 100-year flood. That's what's going to be based on. Number two, with Irene, as you said, you weren't flooded just off the Stony Clove there. Irene really went on the Stony Clove. I think it was maybe less than a 50. It was like a 45-year flood on the Stony Clove. What created the flood on Main Street, again, was because the Esopus channel was so full. It creates a slight backwater all the way up to that Main Street bridge, which is why the water dumps off by the pharmacy so bad, because it's just backing it up, trying to get into the Esopus. And it just, you know, the Esopus elevation, if you look on some videos that people have, you'll actually see the Esopus running that way at a much higher level than the Stony Clove. It's like trying to get up to get in the water. So, yeah, so we haven't seen a 100-year flood on the Stony Clove. Yeah, that water, the floodplain goes all the way back to like the Verizon building. Yeah, so.
And that is why the video I showed you, it's not typical hydraulic modeling. It's a little more, it's two-dimensional, and it's because it's such a unique situation there where you have tributary coming in, you have the backwater from the Esopus, and you have that hamlet right on the inside of the bend there. And when you do the regular modeling, the lines start to cross, and the elevations don't agree. You have very different elevations, which I think, Rob, is where correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where the real problems initially with the FEMA maps were the crossing lines from the two streams didn't agree. So our model, the two-dimensional model, kind of takes care of that video I showed you.
So if we are able to fund some of these recommendations and they bring about the degree of mitigation that we're predicting, would that then feed back into the flood maps and insurance rates?
Yeah, so if we, again, as Mark pointed out, that if we were to do this effectively and could show to FEMA that we've reduced the flood levels, you know, considerably or even slightly, we would provide to them like a letter of map amendment and go through the whole course of that. I think that's like, probably takes like 18 months to go through, because I'm sure nothing's ever easy with the feds. So yeah, then that would help reduce the flood rates. Also in the interim, there's other things you can do. You can look at, again, last year at the conference that we went to, Eric, myself, Don Brewer from the planning board, and a number of other people here, they had a thing talking about reduction in flood insurance rates by just simply people filling in their basement to grade, putting in flood vents, thousands of dollars that people were saving because they were being based on having this huge basement all the way down below flood elevation and without free flow of water. Again, there was one gentleman, a veteran upstate New York, and he had pictures and everything of the check he got back from FEMA for reimbursement for getting his flood rate reduced by doing an elevation study.
By filling in the basement?
Filling in the basement to grade and then putting the flood vents, which allows the water to flow freely. Phoenicia Library's done that. You know, they have the flood vents, which will allow it to flow, but they also had to have engineers show that it wasn't going to float off the foundations or that it wasn't going to implode with waters on the outside and stuff too.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Mark, do you have this in a PDF or something?
Yep, yeah. In fact, yeah.
I can get it, if you could send that to me, and I can, what do you need, a bump drive?
I have it with me.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There is